to Love on the Planets, and we're looking at the second week in January, which is January 8th. I'm Margaret Gray in Dublin.
And I'm Armand Diaz in New York.
What a huge week for relationships, Armand. I mean, really, I think probably would you agree that this is probably likely to be the biggest week for relationships this coming year? I mean, with, the Sun conjunct Venus and Pluto. I mean, it's just absolutely huge. What are your initial thoughts on this big configuration for relationships?
Yeah, I mean, if our experience is down here on Earth or anything like what's going on up in the skies, it's going to be quite the week. It is. I don't know for sure that it's the most intense week of the coming year. It is probably the most intense week of the past year, though. I can't imagine that we've ever had a week to talk about that is as intense as this. And the week, with the beginning of the week, there's very, very unusual conjunction on Monday and Tuesday of the Sun, Venus, and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. That these three planets are at the exact same spot at the exact same time is surely significant for relationship. Although I'm not exactly sure how.
Well, some of my thoughts, Armand, looking at it are, it's certainly, first of all, there's an intense energy around. So it's really a week where I think, it starts off with this feeling of, really, really exploring what our relationships are about, all of them, but particularly our romantic relationships. And also it's a lot about manifesting something in concrete form and something that's really authentic, because this, the conjunction, actually, it's a stellium really, is in Capricorn, which wants things to be earthed, which wants things to be, concrete, which wants commitment. So I think it's really a time where everyone's going to be assessing, if you're in a relationship, you're going to be thinking, do I want to commit further? What is the commitment level in this relationship? Does it suit me? And for anybody who is not in a relationship, maybe it's really a time to think about, do I want to actually be in a relationship at this point? Would I like to commit to something? But also, I think what's great about this is the awareness of the work that's entailed. This is not that kind of Disney concept of all romance and no work. This is really, am I willing to do the work?
This is no Disney movie. Although Disney movies have a little dark thing going on, if you ask me. But that's a separate story.
That's true.
Yeah. I was never a big fan. The thing that I get out of it too is, when Venus met Saturn in Capricorn a couple of weeks ago, it was very much that deadline commitment sort of sense of things. And I feel that the meeting with Pluto is just kind of like, this is it type of thing. Like, this is, there's really no, you're in or you're out. There is this sense of, one way or the other. Capricorn brings the sense of decision. I think the Sun and Pluto and Venus together almost has a sense of inevitability, almost has this sense of, this is what's going to happen. The decision, I think, comes from the fact that it happens in Saturn's sign of Capricorn. And Saturn is sort of at the beginning of the sign, sort of watching them. But there's some, I think that for relationships under stress, this could be it. This could be sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back. Or maybe that straw is coming. But for a lot of relationships, this could actually be a very invigorating, very passionate, and very powerful time in a very positive way. Not least of which because, as you were pointing out before we started recording, this whole stellium in Capricorn is sextiled by Mars and Jupiter in Scorpio.
I think that's so important because we all know that whenever Jupiter aspects anything, it expands the energy. Now, in Scorpio, not only does it expand it, but also it wants the absolute truth. So I think really there's no time for BS anymore. Everything has to be authentic and truthful. And in a way, for anybody whose individual chart or has a composite chart that is very strongly Scorpionic or Plutonian, this is likely to feel like a huge relief because, it's the truth that lasts. And, there's no living under an illusion or a delusion. So I think that might be quite a big relief. And as you mentioned, of course, huge amounts of potential for passion. So quite an amazing time to start a new relationship, really.
Well, it would be an amazing time to start a new relationship. It would be a very, very powerful time. That is a certainty. One thing that I think, we have to keep in mind, though, is that with Pluto and in Capricorn and Scorpio, we are talking about a rather implosive energy, this sort of pulling the energy inward. It's sort of nuclear reaction. You sort of contain it and squeeze it. And maybe the eruption happens for, positive or otherwise, happens more towards the weekend as we get to that Venus square Uranus on the weekend and into early next week.
And that's such a different energy, isn't it? It's almost like there's a beginning of the week and then there's an end of the week. And of course, the end of the week also brings Mercury conjunct Saturn in Capricorn, because it's just going into Capricorn on Wednesday. So communication might feel a little slower, a little calmer. And then suddenly we've got this Venus square Uranus, which really, and it's also sextile Chiron. And then the Sun is square Uranus. So it feels quite disruptive. It feels quite jagged. It feels quite erratic. So a whole different feel to it, where, I notice, I don't know if you notice this, but when there's strong Uranus transits, particularly with the Sun, all our levels of anxiety can go up a little bit. So it's hard to discern what's real, what isn't real, because we just feel that kind of feeling of like being plugged into an electric socket, really.
Yeah, Uranus transits are always very caffeinated. They get things moving. That's one of the reasons why Uranus is such a, an active planet that's good for timing. And so you can't contain the energy. So, what we have, with the Sun, Venus, Pluto, and everything else, and especially Mercury into Capricorn, we're looking for the truth, or at least the bottom line. Mercury and Sagittarius would maybe be a little bit happier with a good story, but, in Capricorn it wants, and there's very much the sense of truth, what is the real story here? And then when, Venus in Capricorn squares Uranus in Aries, that could be the point of which, okay, this is what it is, and this is what we're going to do. Venus and Capricorn, rather traditional in the energies, right? And, Uranus and Aries is anything but traditional. So, if we've put together a picture that isn't truthful, it's gonna, it's likely going to be hurt by the stresses of the transit. On the other hand, if you do know what the truth is, bam, it's time to act on it.
I think this year that really has that flavor, hasn't it, Armand, of really being authentic, being truthful, being real, and particularly later on. I mean, we talked about that in our recording on the transits of 2018, that, when Uranus goes into Taurus as well, more of that practicality and that truth. So it feels like this second week of the year really is setting everything in motion with a bang.
No, very, very much so. Very, very much so. I think the year begins very intensely. And it really, it's a pretty intense year, as I guess they all are. But the beginning of this year really sets the tone. And I think that there's a lot of, in relationships and in other things, I think that there's a lot of that sense of, we try to maintain decorum as far as possible, but at a certain point in time, it's time to do something.
Not surprising that our emails have been very busy with people contacting us with questions and so on. And, it's not surprising because of what's going on in the heavens. So I look forward to seeing you next week, Armand.
Look forward to seeing you too. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.